Okay. So excited to have Jen on the podcast today. Jen, thank you for coming. And I was hoping that you could start off by introducing yourself to all my ladies.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, Jolene. It is such a pleasure to be here with you. It's awesome to connect with someone else in the South. I don't get to do that often. I'm in South Carolina. You're in North Carolina. So we're neighbors practically.
We are.
Yeah, so I am a Southern girl through and through, born and raised in South Carolina. And actually, my family history is all the way back to the 1700s, born and died in South Carolina. No,
Cool.
that's what I'm telling my adult children. You can't leave.
I love it.
Yeah, it's worked on a couple. My oldest, he's in Utah, but yeah, I'm like, you got to get back here. That's what
Absolutely.
we
Yes.
stay here. So let's see, where shall I begin? I grew up in the South and I actually am a convert to the church. My mother and I were baptized on the same day
Oh,
when,
cool.
yeah, when I was 8 and she was 28. So
Oh,
I
wow.
was the right age, but she was a single mom with 2 little girls, me and my sister. And I like to call her my Southern Baptist Mormon mom because she's very Southern Baptist, and we joined the church, and I grew up in the church from 8 on, but she kept a lot of her Southern Baptist roots and
Yes.
still do a lot of those Southern Baptist things like Vacation Bible School. I sent all
Yes.
my kids to Vacation Bible School. It's the best.
It is.
Yeah, you know, it's
Yes.
so good. And just a lot of other fun things. But when I was in 7th grade, I heard of Brigham Young University, and I was like, what? There's a college for all members of the church. I'm going there. Like I decided that day I
Wow.
will go there. And so I applied to college, and I remember my mom being kind of like, okay, are you sure that's too far? I don't think that's a good idea. And I was like, no, I'm going. I know that's the right place for me, even though it was far away from home.
Yes.
And very early on, after I got there, my first year, I met a very nice young man in my ward who was a returned missionary, and he was an AP on his mission. And, you know, I
Yes.
checked all the
Checked all
boxes.
the boxes.
Yes, we checked the boxes, and I got married really quickly. I was barely 19
Mhm.
when we got married. And really quickly, a couple months after we were first married, I started becoming aware of pornography. I was raised by a single mom with a sister. Like I had zero exposure, none personally. I really just wasn't aware of the
Mhm.
whole world out there of pornography. So really early on into our marriage, I became aware of it and just really trusted him. Like, I would find things. He never came to me and told me things.
Mhm.
Find things or evidence. Like we got a pay-per-view bill in the mail back in the
Yes.
day. That was the thing.
Uh-huh.
And so I asked him about that and he's like, "Oh, that's a mistake. I'll take care of it. That's not right." Like he was hiding it and lying to me about it. And I just believed that for a while. And then as it started reoccurring, I
Mhm.
realized we have a problem.
Mhm.
And, my degree was in psychology. I studied a lot about the human mind and I was like, I'm going to help him. And so I
Yes.
started reading all these books and praying and fasting, and we would meet with bishops, and we were kind of in this cycle where I would find something and then he would admit whatever I found. Yes,
Yes.
that was all. That
Mhm.
was it. And then we would sort of start this cycle of I'm not going to do that anymore. But there just weren't the resources out there available that there are today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this was 25 years ago.
I mean,
And
I feel like even in the last 10 years, like even since my husband was going through that, I feel like when he was in the thick of it, there weren't the resources there are now. I feel like in the last 10 years, they're just blown away by the number of resources that keep popping up now. I feel like we were finally saying, hey, this is a problem and let's do something and here's how we can do it.
yes, I agree completely. Even saying the word pornography,
Yeah.
talking about pornography, even in the bishop's office, some
Yeah.
bishops didn't even want to say that. They
Yes.
didn't even want to say that word. They didn't want to talk about it. It was
Mhm.
such a taboo subject. And I just had no exposure or familiarity with it and how it works. So I started diving in and doing all this research and reading and trying to help him and fix him.
Yes.
I was like, I will use my faith and I will work hard and I will trust and I believe it'll
Mhm.
happen. And that did not happen. I did a lot. There was a lot of personal growth in that process of trying to love him through this
Sure.
addiction that he had and trying to forgive him and deal with the
Right.
addiction that was still there, but somehow function in my marriage. And ultimately, it led to extramarital affairs.
Mm.
And for me, that's when I just decided I wasn't going to continue living that way.
Mhm.
It was a very spiritual, pivotal time
Mhm.
because I felt like the whole marriage had been a struggle. We had been dealing with this, and I never considered that we wouldn't overcome it. I just thought, oh, we will, he will, we will work this out. And
Mhm.
I wasn't really considering giving up or getting a divorce. I just really did not consider that an option. But when it came to that point, when other people were involved and it was the second extramarital affair that I was aware of, um, for me, I just knew I couldn't continue on in that relationship. And
Mhm.
it was through a lot of prayer and fasting. I would definitely not say that's a decision point for other people. I
Mhm.
think everyone has to make that decision for themselves.
100%.
Yeah, and every situation is different, but it depends on this, both people and what's
Right.
happening and all
Yes.
of, but I just have to say, I love what you do. I'm so grateful that you talk about this subject and you help women dealing with this. I felt so alone.
Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone. I really didn't talk to anyone about it. And it was just so overwhelming and isolating. And I felt really betrayed and so
Mhm.
hurt by all the things. And I have come to learn that that addiction, someone suffering with addiction, it is about them. It
Yeah.
is not about
Right.
you.
But it's so hard as the wife, right? And I talk about this all the time, how hard it is, especially with pornography, right? When you're dealing with addiction in a marriage of a different substance, when you're dealing with like alcohol or drugs, that's typically not something that the spouse takes on them. And they're like, oh, I think my husband is,
Yes.
drinking because of me. But
Right.
because pornography is sexual, then we
Mhm,
have that relation to us because we have a sexual relationship with our spouse. And so it's
mhm.
very easy to take that on and to say, oh, there must be something wrong with me. I must not be desirable enough or pretty enough or whatever it is. And part of us wants to fix it. It's like, okay, well, let me just figure it out. And then I can be whatever it is that I think that he wants. And then it'll all go away. Right. And we want
Yes.
to fix it somehow, but it's not about us. It's like one of the biggest lies that I work with my ladies on all the time is breaking up with that lie that pornography addiction has anything to do with you. It's a hard
Yes.
one to break.
It is such a hard one to break. And I'm really glad you mentioned that because of the sexual relationship, you're involved in that too.
Yes.
It affects
Yes.
your sexuality, your sexual
100%.
relationship. So it's almost impossible to separate yourself as the woman
Mhm.
from that when even though it's his problem, his
Right.
addiction, it affects you in a
Yeah.
very intimate way. And
Yes.
for most of us women, in the most intimate way, in our biggest vulnerabilities, right? In the
Yeah.
areas that we are the most vulnerable and insecure.
Absolutely. Especially because as women, we tend to we create an identity around our sexuality and our physicality. And so there's that aspect of it where we're getting attacked as a woman, that part of our identity, also as a sexual partner. But then there's also the part where the sexual relationship, the physical relationship that you have with your spouse is the most vulnerable that you can put yourself in, because it's not only making yourself emotionally vulnerable, but it's also making yourself physically vulnerable, which
Mm,
is why it's so it doesn't require, but we can give so much in
yes.
that moment, why it's such a special part of the relationship that you don't have with anybody else usually, right?
Mhm. Right.
And that's why it can hit so hard, is because it's not just hitting you emotionally, it's also hitting you physically in the spots where you are the most vulnerable. So it's such a difficult thing, especially when you don't have the right tools to learn how to work through it.
Yes.
So I'm totally curious. Okay, so you said that you decided to get divorced after the second affair.
Mhm.
So, and I know you said it had a lot to do with spirituality and a lot of talking to God and a lot of personal time with Him. But I would love it if you would share a little bit more about why you decided to stay after the first affair and then what made the difference after the second.
Okay, such a good question. Um, Actually, it was one of those moments, like, I had never considered divorce before that, and
Mhm.
so we get to that milestone, hurdle, whatever you wanna call it, and I still, at that point, thought, "This is gonna get him to this is a line that he's gonna realize now,
Mm,
I have to fix this," right? Like,
yes.
I thought
This must be his rock bottom.
exactly, exactly,
Yes.
and I felt for me, it was, like, this is it, like, I don't know. I started questioning, considering, "Can I go on in a marriage like this? Can I forgive him?" That
Mhm.
was a big thing for me,
Yeah.
like, I really had in my mind, you know how you say things when you're young and you're first married, like,
Yes.
"My husband ever cheats, that's it.
Yes, that's
He
it.
will
That's the one I
never
would
s."
leave. But yes,
Exactly.
I remember saying that.
Yes, I
Yes.
remember saying that and believing that, and so when I got to that situation, I thought, "Maybe that's true. Maybe I can't maybe I won't be able to forgive him, maybe I can't." And when we were there, I didn't feel that way.
Mhm.
I was heartbroken, for sure,
Yeah.
heartbroken and devastated, but because he was also very remorseful and heartbroken and devastated and wanted to reconcile and repair things, I just thought, "Can I?" He that's what he wanted, and I had to really do some deep soul searching and figure out, "Am I willing? Can I forgive?" And so I was like, "Let me try. Let's see. Let me just see if I can do this."
Mhm.
And I will say probably the biggest life changing experience of my life was forgiving him.
Yeah.
Choosing to, and then doing the work to 100% forgive.
Mhm.
It just changed me. It changed me forever. It changed who I am. I gained this deep understanding of the Savior's love for everyone
Mhm.
and really saw him as someone who was attacked by Satan and who was so miserable in his addiction and in this cycle. And I just really gained so much love and understanding for the atonement and how it applies to all of us. And I just really, those ideas that I had, like if my husband ever did this, I would never forget, he would be gone. I didn't feel that way when it came down to it. I felt like I still love him and I want to forgive him.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. But I love that you said that forgiveness is a choice. This is something I talk about a lot. I have like a whole course that I created on forgiveness, on how to forgive, because to me, it felt like one of those abstract concepts, especially in our church that we talk about all the time. We're like, yeah, and then you forgive. And I'm like, I've always thought, we're like, yeah, but who's telling me how you actually do this? I was always very frustrated. I was like, yeah, but how do you actually do that? And I've talked about this before, which my husband did not have an affair, but with the things that he has done, choosing to forgive him, going through that process, for me, what that looked like was processing all of the pain and being willing to let it go.
Mhm.
And even just the other day, I was processing something and I realized, okay, I know how to do this. I know how to forgive. I know how to let go of the pain. I just process the pain and I feel it and I let it go. And for me, that always looks like there's like this tiny bit that my brain wants to hold on to. There's just like this little last bit that like wants to hold on to the bitterness and wants to hold on to the distrust. And forgiving my husband has looked like giving that part to God, like giving that pain to God and saying, all right, I don't want this anymore. And I trust you with it.
Mhm.
And that's what I came to the other night too, is just processing some things. And I thought, I trust God with my pain.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we just want to hold on to it because we like the story. It feels
Mhm.
familiar. We're afraid of letting go of the pain. We're afraid of what it means if we process it all and let it go. It's like, well, then does that mean we're just giving him permission to do it again? Does that mean that we were
Mhm.
okay with it? Does that mean that He's off the hook. We think that holding on to our pain and not forgiving is something that will prevent him from doing the behavior. It
Yeah.
doesn't. All it does, it just acts like a virus. It just kind of sits and it malignitizes is not a word, but it becomes malignant. And then
Yes.
it just starts to like take over. And that's how you
Mhm.
get people who are just kind of immersed in bitterness.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen it too. I've met many people, tried to help many people who hang on to it
Yeah.
and keep it like a badge of honor, or like they
Yes,
just can't let
100%.
go. They
Yes,
can't let go. They won't let go. And
yes.
I did realize ultimately it was my choice. I knew that with him and with God. Like I just knew I can forgive or not. And he basically said that too. Like, I want you to, but if you can't do it, we can't go on. Right. Like it was just like that.
Yeah.
And so like you said, I had to do the work of
Mhm,
forgiving, and
mhm.
it changed me. But what I found was it didn't change him.
Right.
It changed me forever.
Mhm,
But that time period and everything that I went through, it didn't change him.
mhm,
And the cycle repeated very quickly
mhm,
after that. And it was just an epiphany that came in the temple one day.
mhm.
I was suspicious that there was another person involved. And I could tell in that time, too, I will mention, my faith grew and deepened, and my relationship with Heavenly Father grew in a very deep, mature way, right? Through that process of forgiving. But I noticed in him, it was the opposite. He was like,
Mhm.
hands
Yes,
off, and
yes.
he'd been out of the church a little bit, like church council things had, relieved him from all of his
Mhm.
responsibilities and things. And he was kind of footloose and fancy free, not missing it.
Yes.
Whereas I was holding on to all of those things with
Mhm.
all of my life, right?
Yes,
Like that was my safety line.
yes.
And now I look back on that and I recognize I needed that. I needed to be so anchored and so connected with Heavenly Father in a way that I trusted him enough
Mhm.
that the next thing that happened when it happened again, and I realized I was young. I was almost 30. I had 3 young children. My baby was still nursing. I
Oh,
did not work. I was a full-time mom, and
mhm,
I was like, how am I gonna do this? Like, I could not logically make sense of it, and
mhm.
of people in my life who were close to me and cared about me were like, "You have to stay. You don't have a choice. This
Right,
is what it is," you know? And
right.
I was like, "No, I don't." And I just recognized, you know, I had a decision to make then too, and
Mhm.
I knew I would forgive him again the second time. I had done it before, so I knew I could do it again. It was hard, it was definitely hard, but not as hard as the first time. And I knew that I would forgive him. And then the choice was, can I live like this? This
Right,
cycle it was 11 years to get to that, almost 10 years to get to that first time. And then within the next year, there was another person involved. And I just thought, if I choose to stay in this marriage, I know what it's going to look like.
right.
This pattern will repeat. He's not different. I'm different than I was. And can I live with this? And my children, were young. And I just thought, if I stay, I will raise my son to be a man like that. And I will
Mm,
raise my daughter to accept that.
mhm,
And I won't do it.
mhm,
I won't. And so I prayed and fasted about that. And I felt the Lord's overwhelming confirmation that I should not live like that.
mhm.
And then really, really quickly after that, things fell in line and we lived on faith. That's all I can say.
Yes.
I did not know how we were going to survive financially and what all that meant, but I just knew the answer I got and I moved forward with it. And the Lord blessed us immensely.
I love this because I love that you brought up the different responses. I think I hear, so it's one of the things that's like a big pet peeve of mine is when people talk about, they're like, oh, this is why we go through trials, is so that it can strengthen our faith. And I'm like, no, because it's a choice. You get to choose how you go through it and if you take God with you or not. Just because
Oh,
there's an
true.
affair, right? Like, and just you and your husband, your ex-husband, like he responded one way and you responded another. We always get that choice. God doesn't make us respond in a certain way. He's not going to force us to come to him. He's like, here I am, you can come with me. And
Yep.
we can choose that. And when you do, it's so much better It's so
Yes.
much more, it's easier in that you have peace and hope while you're going through it. It doesn't remove the consequences, right? It didn't mean that you no longer got divorced or that it wasn't hard financially or you weren't a single mom of three. That all still was there, but you took
Yep.
God with you, so you're not by yourself.
Yeah.
And you still get to choose that. And I love that. Living
Yeah.
on faith, right? I feel like we've done it so many times, right?
So
And
true. So true.
I love that.
Yeah. It was definitely a hard time.
Yeah, tell me, what I would love to know is I have so many ladies I've worked with so many women who get divorced while they're coaching with me, who decide to stay. Most of them decide to stay, but I've coached many who ultimately decide to get divorced. And I agree. I think it's 100% individual. What I would love is if you have any advice or expertise or anything that comes to mind of something that you want to share with my ladies that I don't know because I've never been divorced.
Okay. Yeah, I have so much. You
I know
know,
that's why you have your own program and you have a
yes.
podcast and everybody should go listen and join all the things.
Thank you. Yeah, I have so much, but there's a few basic things that I've sort of realized. These are basic principles that I feel like everyone should know. I'm very much pro marriage. As a person who's been through divorce, I will tell you, it's not the easy way out.
Yeah,
It's not. It's hard. It can be harder than staying. Let's put it that
sure.
way.
Well, your
Yeah.
stuff follows you,
Yes.
right? That's the
Yes.
thing. It's like it doesn't go away. It's not like,
So,
hey, if I once I get out of this relationship, then everything that happened, all that pain, all the trauma, all of that goes away too. No, you bring it with you because it's all
yes.
internal, right?
Yes.
And then you
Yes.
just bring it into your next relationship if you want to deal with it.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Right.
that comes with you, all of that, the responses, the consequences of everything you've experienced. And so I encourage everyone who's considering divorce, who's dealing with pornography in a marriage, do everything that you can to work it out in your marriage if both people are willing.
Mhm.
If both people are still invested and willing, that's why I say I'm pro marriage,
Right.
because however hard you think it is to work through it together in a marriage, it is exponentially harder when you're dealing with another person who is not the father of your children, who
Yes.
has the same or very similar problems,
Right.
and then you have all of your same issues.
Right.
And then you just have a whole lot more people involved,
Mhm.
like a new spouse and stepchildren and two exes and child support and alimony going in and going out in both directions and in-laws and outlaws. And it's just exponentially more complicated. And
Sure.
the issues are very similar. If it's not identical, it's similar. It's
Sure.
not easier, not easier, more complicated. And what I see with people, many of my clients are divorced 2 times, 3 times.
Mhm.
You're less invested in a second
Ooh,
marriage.
interesting.
It just happens. It's
Yeah,
not
you're more cautious.
always.
Are you more cautious? Is that what it is?
You're less invested. It's easier. You've already been divorced. When it gets hard and you don't have children with this person and you've been single and you can support yourself financially and you've done it before,
Yeah,
it is so easy to go,
sure.
I'm out. I don't have to do this. I can get a divorce.
That's
I'm telling
fascinating.
you, it's so much harder. And both people feel that way
Mhm.
because if you've both been divorced, people are less invested in a second marriage or a third marriage. It just happens. They come in with prenups and they never blend their finances. And then
Yes.
these are my children, these are your children. And marriage
Yeah.
is hard anyway.
Yes.
You have all of that separate,
Mhm.
plus the knowledge. I can do without you. I don't
Right.
need
I don't
you,
need
right?
to. Yes. And
Exactly.
you
I
don't have
have
the
done this.
fear, right? You don't have the
No,
fear of like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. I don't think I could do that.
no.
Yeah, that's all gone.
Because you've done it.
Yeah.
I can do that and I can do it better this time.
Yes.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. And so that's why I tell people there's no green grass. It's not easier on
Yes.
the other side of divorce.
Right.
It's harder. And I only recommend that when it's the only option or the very best option. And
Mhm.
that's up to the individual. I never assume that. I don't think I
Right.
know. I think everyone has to make that decision for themselves. The other thing I would say is that Yeah, I already mentioned second and third marriages are so much more complicated, more
Mhm.
difficult. Um, what else was I gonna say? Um, that it is possible if you go through divorce that you can have a happy life, a better life, and a better marriage
Mhm.
after divorce. A
Mhm.
lot of people, they lose their hope.
Yes,
They come out disillusioned and so disappointed with all of the defeat and these ideals that we
right,
have of eternal families and families are forever and they have this broken family and it's complicated explaining to your children and grandchildren like who's sealed to who and who is going to
right.
be with who, right? Like kids want to know all
Yeah.
that stuff and it feels very important. But, it is possible. I have found that for myself, and that's what I help my clients find is divorce is not death, and you can move through it and past it and grow better because of it. And ultimately, that's what I learned for myself, and that's what I help other people do is take all of those difficult, challenging things that come up when you go through divorce
Mhm.
and grow better because of it. Do the work on yourself to grow better and be a better person in your next marriage.
I love this. I love that it's still all about this is one of the reasons why I love you so much and why we resonate with each other because there's still so much personal accountability. It's
Yeah.
yeah, you were affected by somebody else's choices, but you were affected by them. So let's take responsibility for that part. The part of
Mhm.
how you're responding, the consequences, the decisions you're making, the thoughts you're having, the feelings you're having, because that carries with you whether you get remarried or not, even if you just stay single, like
Yeah.
that stays with you in whether or not you pursue the next relationship or still the way you think about yourself and what you make your past relationship mean about you. All of that comes with you and needs to be addressed because you can have a happy life. And I think that was so powerful what you just said is so many women just kind of settle, whether
Mhm.
that's alone or even in their next relationship, they think they're not worth it, or even if they just stay in their current relationship because they don't believe that there is hope and they don't believe that they're worth the effort.
Mhm. For sure. A big part of that is, like you mentioned, learning to take care of your own needs.
Yeah.
That's another thing when people are considering divorce. I try to get in there and say, why? What is it that's the problem besides pornography, besides whatever? Like, what are you lacking in your life?
Yes.
And
100%.
you have to learn to fill that for yourself because when you're divorced, you're alone and you're a parent and you still have all the same responsibilities on
Yes.
you. Except you just lost that other person who sometimes maybe occasionally would help,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so what do you think's gonna happen
Right.
when you get divorced, right? Like there's no white knight coming to save you who's
Yes.
gonna do everything perfectly. It's not reality.
Right.
And so I really like you. This is why we click is I spend a lot of time talking about taking care of your own needs
Right.
before you get divorced. If you're considering
Mhm.
divorce, like you can't be so disappointed and upset and miserable with your spouse because they're not making you happy or completing you
Right.
or whatever,
Yes.
and then think someone else is going to do that for you. No one can do that for you. And so that is so important. And the other part of that is just processing the emotion like you said.
Mhm.
There's a lot of pain that comes with divorce.
Yes.
And a lot of it you can't know, just like grief from death. You
Right.
can't know until you've gone through it and sat in it and experienced it. And you have to learn to process all of that or it will destroy you. It will pull you down and it will steal your joy. And so
Mhm.
you have to learn how to do that for yourself. And I love that you teach that. It's so important.
I
So
love that,
important.
and I love the name. I would love for all the ladies who are resonating with Jenn's message right now, go work with Jenn. How can they find you?
Okay, so I'm at ldsdivorce.com. I have a program, Faithful Divorce, that I work with men and women for 1 year to sort of get them through that whole year.
Mhm.
And you can subscribe, you can do another year. Divorce doesn't end. So, it lasts
Just
forever.
keep going.
It keeps going. And there are issues 20 years down the road when your
Right.
kids are getting married. It
Mm,
can bring all that stuff back up when your
yes.
ex is there and it doesn't end. So, yes, I love to help people deal with this. It's called Faith-Filled Divorce, and I have a podcast, Joy in the Journey with Jenn. And I would say my biggest message is you get to choose your mindset about your divorce. You get to choose how it influences your life. And I like to tell people that you are not divorced. It is not who you are. You're not damaged or labeled with a scarlet letter because you've gone through divorce. It's an experience that you've gone through, and it can make you so much better. It can actually help you, drive you to want to have a better marriage, better life when you realize, okay, all of that, those are flaws and imperfections, problems I can fix, I can work on. And when you do the work on yourself and you tap into the potential that you have for your life and realizing you can put that into a new relationship where someone else has done the work on themselves or
Mhm.
they're willing to do that work together, it's really awesome to see that come together. And I feel like that's sort of what I get to experience now, being remarried. My husband was also divorced, and it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of work, but we're reaping the rewards of that work, right? Like what comes from doing the work is having a beautiful, peaceful, joyful quality of life that we've had to work hard for. And I
Yeah.
feel like everyone can have that.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming today, Jen. Thank you for talking
Sure.
to all of my ladies. And ladies, go follow Jen. Go join her program. She is the one to help you. And I love that you left with that message. You're like, yeah, you can have a happy life, a joyful life, and you are not what you've been through. Again,
Yeah.
you're not your husband's pornography problem, and you're
Um,
also not your marital status.
no,
None of that
so
is who you
good.
are.
That is so awesome, Jolene. Thank you so much. You're awesome.